Let's continue then with our special broadcast on Johannesburg's water challenges. Of course, just a reminder also that this broadcast is in collaboration with Joburg Water. So let's continue then with our discussion. We're still with Johannesburg Water's Gugulethu Quma, Operations Manager at Johannesburg Water. We're now joined by Professor Adesola Ilemobade from the Wits University School of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. And of course, apologies for butchering your name, but I'm sure I will get it right. But on a serious note, Prof, of course, we've been talking about just some of the challenges that this country is experiencing in as far as water is concerned. When you look at the data on the ground currently, I mean, from various sectors, I think the South African Institute of Civil Engineers, the Water Research Commission, including even the Water and Sanitation Department with its Blue Drop report, as well, of course, as municipal self-assessment, all of them suggesting, of course, that, there is a critical water infrastructure challenge that we have. In fact, it is a water crisis at this point in time. What have been your observations in as far as that is concerned? And I mean, this is a solutions-driven segment, and I want us to start touching on how we can get out of this situation that we are finding ourselves in.
Well, thank you, Gugulethu. Thank you, Nati. Apologies, Gugulethu. Thank you, Nati, for inviting me, and hello to your listeners. I must say up front that I'm extremely excited about the upgrades and preventative maintenance that is happening by Rand Water. And just like the previous professor had spoken, this is a massive system. Joburg Water, for example, has 11,000 kilometers of pipes in the ground, 11,000 kilometers of sewer pipes. So previously it's water pipes, 11,000, sewer pipes, 11,000, and a whole network or system of infrastructure. So it is exciting to see the maintenance that is happening. Rand Water, in terms of bulk infrastructure, is about 3,500 kilometers, just its bulk pipes. So doing this maintenance is very welcome because it's preventative. We've got this massive machine that needs to supply services to 20 million people. So maintenance is needed. I think we're in a good place, seeing that it's an inconvenience, obviously, to many people. But we're in a good place because it's happening, and it's happening proactively.
So when you look at, the problems just from a cost-serving measure, I mean, what are some of the problems there that, we can actually zone into and try and solve? Because as it stands, there's just not enough, particularly on crucial maintenance, as well as when it comes to distribution. What are some of the challenges there, and how can we circumvent those?
There are a lot of challenges, Sunati. And as you discussed in the previous segment, the challenges are financial. They are human resource. They are non-revenue water. It's a whole box of challenges that Joburg Water, as the retailer of water, and Rand Water, as the bulk supplier of water, has to contend with on a daily basis. So the big question is, how efficient can each one of these institutions be in their mandate of supplying water to the residents of the city? And there are a number of target measures and target audiences that one can look at. So, for example, the National Water Resource Strategy of 2023, which is published by the Department of Water and Sanitation, has a model for water demand and water conservation. And that model speaks to target audiences as well as target measures. And your target audiences are related to your Department of Water and Sanitation as the custodian of water in South Africa. It relates to your water boards, who are the bulk extractors of water from our river systems and the purifier of that water. and it speaks to the retailers of water, such as Johannesburg Water, and to the consumers of water, and lastly, to those who clean the water before it's released back into our environment. So those are the audiences that our efficiency measures must target. It cannot just be the consumer. It must be the entire value chain of institutions that benefit from and that produce water.
And Mr. Quma, just on that note, I mean, earlier on we spoke about, and again, as Prof is saying, there is, of course, this massive value chain in as far as water is concerned. When we start talking about collaborative efforts, you know, and then we, of course, rope in the private sector, rope in the, you know, service, the consumers, residences, businesses, and the like, and of course, yourselves and government. I mean, what are some of, you know, the collaboration that is greatly needed by entities like yourself, particularly as it speaks to, you know, addressing, improving the water demand management, encouraging water conservation initiatives, as an example?
Yes, since we've already elaborated, this is a big value chain.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at Gauteng in particular, our demand in Johannesburg Water is currently sitting at 1,700 to 1,800 megaliters a day, and that is city of Johannesburg alone, which is the biggest from the Rand Water as a bulk supply. So benefiting from collaborating approach will be the consumers looking at, if per capita per day, we currently at about 250 liters per capita per day. That is quite high for a drought country. And if we can bring that to at least 170 per capita per day, that will reduce the demand in the entire system. And as City of Johannesburg and Johannesburg Water in particular, we need to bring that demand at least to below 1,500, because that is a targeted line as the maximum that we should be. And the infrastructure that we're having as well need to deliver that 1,500 megaliters per day. The moment you go over that, now you are straining the whole system, because now that 300 megaliters a day is quite a huge number. Looking at on our side, we also have a high non-revenue water that is also sitting there, and we need to deal with the physical losses part of that. As well, there's commercial losses that we're talking about, but the physical losses is quite high, sitting at 23% of that value that I was talking about now. So the private sector now is coming in with a new infrastructure when there's new townships, new suburbs that are being extended within the city, and the bulk infrastructure is deployed. So that's already a public-private partnership that is already encouraged in those areas to help us to deal with the entire value chain of delivering the water to the customers.
And Prof, just looking at the capital expenditure that is needed for some of these programs, and also just capping, you know, the demand as we just hearing now, what are some of the things that we can do? I mean, there's obviously talk of maybe seeing that if we could perhaps ring fence just some of the funding that is going into these pertinent, you know, infrastructure developments in the water industry. Just your solutions around what we can do and start seeing, you know, from particularly government and also other entities.
Two things. The previous segment, you spoke about ring fencing, and that continues to be a big question for the city of Johannesburg, as well as all other cities, water services authorities who are overseeing water provision within their jurisdictions. Is it possible for the city of Johannesburg to ring fence all the payments for water within the city and allow Joburg Water to then operate on those monies coming in? It's also it's the similar question that is asked in terms of sanitation. What the city of Joburg does is that it bills consumers for water, sanitation, electricity. Everything goes into one pot, one proverbial pot, and then the city decides what it does with that money. And Joburg Water, in addition to City Power and the other entities, then go to the city annually to retrieve monies for their operating and capex expenditure. So ring fencing is a recommendation on the table. The city knows about it.
Yeah.
Whether the city agrees to it, considering that it also has a broader mandate, not just services. The second is payment for services, and this continues to be a very contentious issue for consumers, especially consumers who are faced with intermittent water supply.
And especially consumers who are paying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So it's a very contentious issue with consumers, but it's important for consumers to know that paying their services is important. It shouldn't be considered as optional because of the intermittency that they're experiencing in the current time. In the short term, it's inconvenient. But in the long term, there's yield for consumers in terms of service delivery. So it's really important that consumers know that payment for services, and as a consumer, what I would want to ensure if I was paying for services is that I'm correctly billed. And consumers are protected by the Metrology Act to demand that their services be billed correctly. And if they are in doubt about that, then there are mechanisms within the city that allow them to approach the city for a correct metering of their services.
One of the key things that we have not discussed, or at length at least, is just the vandalism of infrastructure. Of course, this is also compromising on much needed services, to those paying, customers particularly. What are you doing in as far as that is concerned? I mean, we've heard of, provinces like the Western Cape, for instance, who are doing a very good job in as far as that is concerned. But what are the lessons here that you can learn, just from those that are doing remarkably well in as far as that is concerned?
Vandalism is troubling the infrastructure of the city. Joburg Water, City Power, it's quite extreme, such that now it can be classified as well as sabotage. Looking at the cost now of security, we should be channeling those funds to infrastructure upgrades, and now the value or the cost that is associated to security keeps on escalating. We have to change in the middle of the financial year, try to fund some of the security demand. I bet every day, every week, there is a side of the city that is being vandalized, targeted either through from the City Power when there is no power, or from Johannesburg Water. Now, it's something that was not norm then, but nowadays, every week we are dealing with the vandalism. Now we need to spend on that on that particular infrastructure, while we still need to continue rechanneling some of the funds to deal with the security. So I think security as well now need to be attended from a different platform, because the security or the theft that we have is more sophisticated than previously. So they quite now dealing, we're not dealing with just opportunistic type of theft. We're actually dealing with syndicate that is targeting to vandalize the infrastructure for a particular market that perhaps needs to be explored.
I think let's leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time.